My name's Satyadasa, and I'm going to be giving a presentation, a talk, saying some things this evening on our theme. Our theme generally is Buddhism, the Dharma, so we try to impart some of that according to our understanding and what we've learned and what we've explored over the years as well as we can. So we've been following the Noble Eightfold Path. That we're in the middle of that series now. The Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. So the Noble Truths are an expression of an outpouring from the Buddha, which was systematized into these reflections that there is suffering in this life, or there at least is unsatisfactoriness, if not outright suffering. There can be deep unsatisfactoriness, that this unsatisfactoriness has a cause, which is, ignorance of how things are, and how that becomes hatred and greed and, delusions of various kinds that props up that suffering, and that there is a cessation of suffering. So there is a state beyond this suffering, which is good news. That's the good news bit. And there's a bit in the Bible where they say this is the good news. But then there is a path. So it's not random. The arising of a Buddha, the arising of any kind of liberation or freedom, or however we talk about it, and there are many ways of talking about it, is not random. It arises on the basis of conditions. And the Buddha, over his lifetime, through innumerable ways, really, probably not innumerable, but a lot of ways, expounded how to transform the mind. So this talk is called A Conscious Evolution. I just discovered that. Oscar just showed me the title. I thought it was called Right Effort, because it's the same thing, okay? So what we're dealing with here is one of the limbs of the Eightfold Path, and we've had 5 so far. We started off with vision. I'm not going to recap them all, but I just wanted to say one thing that came to my mind. A story that was told when I've been coming to the Buddhist Center for many years, 25 years, and there's some that just stick in your mind, and it was about a guy, let's call him an order member. He was hiking. He was out hiking, and he obviously, when you go hiking, you sort of start off. It's a great thing to do, I love it. I sort of set off, got all the maps and all the gear and everything. By the end of the day, I usually feel like I've walked too far. I now want to get back. And this day was going like this for this guy, and it started to really heavily rain. It was pouring with rain. He was in the Lake District. He's taken shortcuts. He's in the mud, and it's really a quite grim day. He's getting grumpy to himself. He's thinking, you can start feeling sorry for yourself when you're on your own and you just get the wet's going into your neck, and so he's mumbling to himself, muttering about where's this youth hostel, what's going on, and he just basically slid into the lake. So he just tripped and slid down the bank in the mud up to his middle in the cold water, and then it all changed. Everything, the experience, and I can imagine it, and maybe you can just imagine it, like as just a complete giving up, that was triggered by this, here we're going along, grumbling to ourselves, having thoughts of this or that, resentment or old stories, whatever it is. Suddenly he's in this freezing cold water, and it gives him a breakthrough. It gives him a moment where something opens up. It's always difficult to say what opens up. It's often best just to say, something opens up. And we explored this in the first talk. I think it was Pranyamanis was talking about that most of us have a vision moment. That's the first step in the Eightfold Path, is vision. Some kind of glimpse, it might be that it comes through nature or sport or falling in a lake. It might come through listening to music. It can come through meditation, obviously. It could come through, the one that I like was just, vision can just arise by getting older, actually, by the process of life battering you around quite a bit, and then and with a sort of steady application of effort, I found that quite inspiring, that you can develop a view, a more clear view. So that's vision. And that, in a way, alerts us to that there is something a bit more, there's something a bit deeper, there's something a bit, pick your metaphor, there's something a bit more. And then begins, in the Noble Eightfold Path, the process of transforming the mind. And we've been through emotion, speech, action, so body, speech and mind, transforming them, livelihood, and I think that's it, isn't it? Effort. We're on effort tonight. So effort. This is me. We're doing effort. Okay. Another thing that came to my mind was this poem by a guy called Nyosol Ken Rinpoche, who was a revered Tibetan master, I think maybe of the 20th century. There was a photo of him, so it was probably the 20th century. And he said this: "Rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thoughts, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace." That came to mind because we're talking about effort and the word "this exhausted mind." Rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thoughts. I'm going to be talking a bit about karma and thoughts and views this evening. But just to say, when we're talking about effort, life takes effort, not just spiritual practice. You're almost doomed to have to make an effort. In the end, even sustaining laziness is a kind of effort. It's kind of really tiring, isn't it, being lazy or whatever. There's no choice but we have energies, we have bodily energies, we have a life, we have to use it somehow, and it can be just exhausting. And what he says here, this exhausted mind, he sets it against a much deeper backdrop, which we might come to, but sort of beaten helplessly by karma, and we'll go into that, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. It's such a lovely expression, that there's the backdrop, and why we call it a conscious evolution. We're trying to allude to a bigger picture here, a bigger picture about what the mind is and what life is and what we're engaged in over long periods of time. That definitely comes into the Buddhist tradition. It's not just the conscious evolution of this life for small aims. There's a bigger picture that we can tune into, whereby maybe what life is in a much bigger sense than our little life is an evolution, you could say. This is a conscious evolution, and we're going to get into the details of so some specifics about how we might approach that based on what the Buddha said, but there's this bigger picture. I might come back to that. So really I'm going to talk about karma mainly and dharma, and we're going to explore what are called the 4 exertions or the 4 efforts. So karma, does everyone know what karma is? What's karma? Anybody want to just throw? We probably talk about it a lot here. We've only got a few subjects here, really. Only a few. Sorry. Does anybody want to fire on that one? Actions. Perfect. Yeah. Karma means actions. What kind of actions?
Of body, speech and mind.
Actions of body, speech and mind. Fantastic, yeah. So the whole range of the way that we can use our energies, yeah, through our bodies, our speech and our mind. Anything else? Volitional. Thank you at the back. Nick, yeah. So, yeah, karma. The Buddha ethicized the law of karma. So karma used to mean just ritual action. At his time, it really meant just the action of, slaughtering something at a shrine or building a fire or some kind of ritual action. But he said, and through through that rituals and the priests that controlled those rituals, they were able to offer purification to people. That was the idea. You performed a ritual. This still goes on. It's nothing. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But that's, you purify yourself through ritual action. But the Buddha said no. Karma really means intentional action. So he ethicized it. He made it an ethical law. And really, what he was saying is that there is. It's not that he made it up and said that there's an ethical law, like sort of Moses sort of coming down with the commandments or something and saying this is the law. It can be observed that actions, particularly as they're coloured by our intentions, our motives, our thoughts, our proclivities, our inclinations, our strong urges, as they're coloured by all these things, so they produce consequences that are maybe complex, but there's a regular aspect to that. It's not random, So our state of mind at each moment has arisen on the basis of conditions, and those conditions are many. Of course, there's a vast array of conditions which bring the human body or anything into existence that are not to do with our intentional actions. But whether the quality or our experience in terms of happiness or suffering, to put it in its basic format there, is going to be determined by the quality of our previous actions. And those actions may mature immediately in a state of mind, or they may mature at a more distant point, or they may build up a kind of sort of an atmosphere of the mind may be built up over time. And there's different types of karma. Some are supposed a kind of what they would call weighty karma. This would be an action which is. So first of all, I'm just going to explain that there's two types of karma that are called kusala and akusala. And kusala means skillful, and akusala means not skillful. And a skillful action is one which produces a mind which is moving towards awareness, towards positivity, towards freedom, and towards openness. And so that's those kind of actions of body, speech, and mind, actions with intention that create those kind of states. Those are called skillful karmas. And unskillful karmas are those actions which produce and result from a mind which is lost really in unawareness, habitually maybe contracted, grasping, sort of narrow, repetitive sort of state of mind. And harmful ultimately. So a skillful mind leads to happiness and well-being, if you want to call it well-being, for ourselves and for others, and an unskillful mind leads to harm, and that harm, might not be that it's obvious, something coming back to us from the outside world. We behave in a certain way, and we get a donk on the head at some point later, and there's a YouTube video of us getting our comeuppance or something. That may not happen. That may happen. It's a bit hard to determine exactly what happens to us and track through all the possible reasons why something might happen to us. If you get ill, for example, it can be, it's difficult to. It's unpleasant even to say that you're ill because of something that some of your unskillful action. You don't really know. Do we really know? We may have a hunch. It may be personally useful to reflect on. Actually, having said that, I can certainly sense that when I get stressed, I get ill. So, and when I get stressed, there's usually a sense of polarization, anger. There's something that I've set up in my mind. So actually, sometimes definitely illness arises through mental factors, but maybe not. But always the internal aspect of our experience is going to be coloured by how we are, even if we're experiencing pain and difficulty, which is inevitable in life, and the Buddha's path wasn't about avoiding pain and difficulty. You can't really do that with a body and a mind and a heart. You can't really do that. So that's skillful and unskillful. And some of these actions can be weighty, very sort of heavy actions that really produce very serious consequences for ourselves, and some of them are less weighty, and So what we're going to talk about is working with the law of karma. That's the first thing. So when we're consciously evolving, when we're making an effort, what we're doing is we're working with that. And there's a list called the 4 exertions, and I'm going to just touch on probably 2 of them in a bit of detail, but maybe just not the other 2 so much. And it's a breaking down of the kind of ways in which we're trying to work. I say work with the mind. I can't avoid that expression. I don't like it for some reason. Work with the mind. Is that just me? I don't like it because, and I don't like to say work with the heart either, because that's cheesy, and I don't like that. So I never know what to say. The mind, working with my mind, it always seems like there's my mind over here, and I'm going to work with it. It's all a bit clinical or something. The first exertion made on the Buddhist path is when they're not sequential really. They're 4 exertions that we do it that you would be doing as much as you could. The first one is preventing unskillful states from arising. So unskillful states will arise on the basis of conditions, and we can make an effort to actually prevent them from arising in the first place. That's probably a good start, isn't it? When we go on a retreat, for example, lots of unskillful, or even when we come to a Buddhist center in the evening, lots of unskillful possibilities are thereby avoided straight away. Straight away. The traditional way of putting it is that you're guarding. You need to guard the gates of the senses, to try to guard the gates of the senses. So the analysis, it might be really obvious, I don't know, but what gives rise to an unskillful action will start off in the sense world. So, and in the sense world, so there's your 5 physical senses, and then there's your mind, which is conceived of as a sense in Buddhism. It's a mind. The objects of the mind are ideas, and the objects of sight is the eye, and that each of these is given is analysed as having a consciousness attached to it. So there's eye consciousness, which arises when there's an external object. There's an eye organ, and there's consciousness. In the analysis. So this is going on all the time. It's going on right now. And if you see somebody you don't like, you really don't like, the first thing that happens is that you see them, and the second thing that happens is that there'll be a feeling that is attached to that, which will probably be unpleasant. And if you're practicing awareness, which is difficult in the moment, particularly if seeing someone you don't like, you will notice your body maybe tenses. You have an unpleasant rush through the body, tightening of the jaw, whatever it is that is your particular way of not feeling good about someone. There will be a feeling, and that's the next thing that happens. And so on the basis of a sense contact, there's a feeling. Neither of these in the Buddhist thinking, so it might be that you see some food that you don't like, or you taste something unpleasant in your mouth and it's not very nice or whatever. These are all not ethically charged. So they will arise because in the past you've had this response to this person. You had a row with them the other week, they sent you a rotten email, blah, blah, blah. You will have this because of conditions that will have included your karma, your actions. But when it arises in the moment, it's quite neutral. It's just, there it is. That would have happened because we're set up like that. Then, of course, the karma comes in. Then the action, the mind picks that up and travels down habitual pathways that you've worn in well. resentments and whatever is the patterning that you've set up with regards to this person, for example, using that as an example, that will take off. When we go on a retreat or when we meditate, or the effort that we're making is supported by the conditions that we're in. So meditation in itself won't do the whole job for you. You know, just meditate. We don't meditate for long enough. I don't know how long you meditate for. There's a lot of the day when we're not meditating, isn't there? There needs to be some bigger practice going on. And here, when we're guarding the gates of the senses, or we're trying to work out what do I usually react to, where's the real point of. There's probably quite a lot of points where it might be just coming home from work. You know, sometimes you come home from work and you're really tired, and then you go grumpy, and then you make a bad comment to somebody in your life or something. You might notice that there's weakness points. So how can I prevent those points from arising? I mean, this is not complex stuff. Of course, it's difficult to do. It's hard. You know, there are often moments when we just walk into things and we're unaware and we're off. But guarding the conditions, guarding the gates of the senses. It's amazing when you're on a retreat, for example. You think, well, I'm meditating and that's why I'm having these experiences. But actually, so much of it is just because you're not in your usual conditions, and you're having a break from the sort of relentless, the world of, that keeps us plugged into entertainments, that keep us infuriated on watching things on the internet, or whatever we do. We don't do that on retreat, and that's guarding the gates of the senses. So the effort there is to prevent the unskillful from arising. The one I want to talk about more is eradicating the unskillful that has arisen. So there you go. So unskillful does arise, and we eradicate it. Sound good? You frog march it out of the room, get rid of it. No, you don't do that. We try to, if you could, that would be all right. So here we have, this is more in meditation. We're going to, this might be more familiar with you, for you, but again, it's not just in meditation. When we're working with the law of karma, we're working with actions of body, speech and mind, and in a way, meditation is a kind of a deepening of the mind aspect of that. Yeah. To create more skillful karma. We'll come on to the creating skillful. So hindrances. Do you know what the hindrances are? Anybody knows what the hindrances are? Hindrances to meditation?
Ill will.
Ill will. Yeah, I'm going to just write them down. Some good old unskillful states. They're usually more interesting than the list of positive states, which, joy, bliss, oh great. But ill will has got loads of, what else? I'll come back to ill will. What other hindrances are there? Aversion, thank you. Well, aversion is kind of, let's put that under there, ill will, yeah, we'll group that in that one. When we're talking about the hindrances, we're talking about a kind of a way of looking at our experience and first of all, just sort of it's a tool for becoming more aware of what is the content of our minds. Very often, the first step of any conscious evolution is just to become aware, just to notice what is, and very often that can actually dissipate the ill will, for example, and this is very deep. You might have to use more things, but we'll come on to that. So ill will and aversion. Restlessness, thank you. Yeah. Paul has done this list before. Okay. Any more? Boredom. I'm going to put that under restlessness. Yeah.
Sense desire,
thank you. Sense desire. and it's more on the neurotic side. So, yeah, sense desire. I'll come back to that. Yeah.
Doubt and indecision.
Thank you. Who said that? Thanks. Yeah. There's one more. I've momentarily forgotten it.
Sloth and torpor.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, good. So when we make an effort in meditation, we usually have to. You usually have to make. I find when I sit down, as Akasha Mitra was saying in the first half, the way that you work in terms of effort, the amount of effort that you use, is a subtle thing in meditation. Sometimes there is a kind of need to use a bit more effort to really sort of muscle into your mind and sort of find out what's going on. And you're using a mind that is already a little bit crude when you start meditating. It's already still caught up in stuff that's going on. It hasn't really let go of some planning meeting or whatever. It's tired, and the whole way that we start off is possibly a bit sort of lumpy in our minds. So we use effort, and then we start to notice how the mind is. So these hindrances, they basically their food source, if you like, is our unawareness. That's their basic food source. That's how they keep going. As soon as we apply awareness, something will change. I don't know whether you've noticed this, but if you're in a quite a sort of a negative state, and you start to meditate or you start to practice meditation, obviously if you're in a very negative state, it's actually really hard to sit down and do something like meditation. But funnily enough, on retreat you can do that because the conditions are good, and that's where you really do make some breakthroughs, because you're really able to look at quite negative states that can arise. But normally we can't, and then when we start to meditate, we kind of, if we're able to, you notice. Let's say the first one. Oh, let's go to ill will and aversion. I like that. We usually teach to really find the body in experience, because what's lost as we've zipped up into our thoughts, and we've had powerfully charged thoughts that are charged up by the negative emotion, that have storylines attached to them that are then it's going on. It's unawareness. It's unaware. Now, when we sit down to meditate, we'll think, "Oh God, this is not meditation, is it?" That's another thought that we then blame ourselves with. But actually, what we're coming down to is the body. We're starting to feel the body. Okay, so I'm now doing that myself, just trying to feel the body, and it immediately starts to have an effect. And it's really hard to be. It's actually not possible, I think, to be aware of the body, or aware of sound, or aware of. It immediately draws you out of the tangle of neurotic thinking, what he calls neurotic thinking in that poem. And then your mind springs back into the neurotic thinking because you lose awareness. So at the beginning, and then there's a sort of a tussle period in the meditation where I find I'm summoning up the energy or the creative resources to think about how I'm going to work with this state. I can't quite think of it at the moment, but there's something going on. And so I remember that thing about the body, and then hopefully over time there's a more subtle working. Okay, so let's just look at all of these. So ill will is the tendency. Is the tendency to sort of to push away experience, to not want whatever is present to us. Sense desire is the opposite of that. That is the desire to have something, to pull something towards you. How can we say that more subtly? Does that... Would anybody like to say anything more about those two hindrances?
I'm curious about how, is pain ill will?
No.
So where does pain fit in? Say physical pain?
That's not a hindrance. Yeah. Pain is not a hindrance.
What about distractions, though? Where does that fit in?
So all of these could be called distractions, if you like, because the classically though, actually restlessness comes with anxiety. Distractions is a funny word that we sometimes say, oh, I was feeling very distracted today, or my meditation was really, really distracted. And what's that phrase that comes up sometimes? We're distracted from distraction by distraction. So it's good to notice that we are distracted, but we could give it a bit more kind of content than just being distracted. So it might be what are we distracted by? Often distraction would be in the sense spheres. So one would be, one of my distractions is one of my main ones is craving ideas. Because that's a sense. Because I said the mind is a sense. So that's a very common craving, is simply craving ideas. Repeating thoughts, images, somehow wanting to work things out in my mind and set things straight, or just sort of, I don't know, just endlessly wanting the images of my own mind, in some kind of way. So distraction could be, would be anything that pulls us away from awareness into a more sticky and entangled, unaware experience. Yeah, and one has to sort of feel that and know that, and that's what you get to know when you meditate. You get to know, oh yeah, that's like that. That's that state. That's unawareness. And then as soon as you recognise I'm in I'm distracted. Sometimes that's enough to bring you back to just the body and bring you back to a more simple attention. And from there you can start to generate the more skillful aspects of the mind. But pain isn't in this list, because pain, that's physical pain or mental pain, are not considered hindrances.
But if it's like overwhelming physical pain, then you can't sustain that, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. It's obviously very hard. Usually, I've got the classic teaching is that pain is the what is it, the first arrow or something like this, and then is it that right? Is it 2 arrows? How does that go? Where do the arrows go? Like it's in your body, let's just say. And then the second arrow is the one that we throw in ourselves, and that's all our response to the pain. There is a pain in life. Having a body. I mean, obviously, you can take sensible steps if you're in pain in meditation, like Kashamitra is talking about. You don't have. There's nothing kind of inherently worthy about sitting with pain if you can just move a bit. But yeah, pain. Particularly emotional pain and physical pain can be intolerable, yeah. But the teaching is that it is our response to our experience, even if it is awful to us. It's our experience to it that generates the world for the world of our own minds and our experience.
It would be like our aversion to the pain.
It would be aversion when pain comes up. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, aversion or ill will. And under that comes all kinds of lovely things like rage and malevolence. Even envy is a subdivision of ill will. So envy, because it relies really on polarization of something, really, really hating. Obviously this goes on in the world a lot now, because unfortunately there's a lot of polarization in the world, and we are conditioned beings, so we're often forced to fall into the polarizations, or we not forced to, but that's the milieu which we live in. It's very hard not to get polarized now. So or envy is a type of polarization where you sort of feel a great distance between you and the person who has what you want. So that's that state. The others are restlessness and anxiety. They go together. Restlessness is the body unable to settle. Anxiety is the mind unable to settle. It's difficult to sort of say what anxiety actually is. It's a complex of, but it's easy to see that it's very habitual. And then sloth and torpor is often the fourth one listed. It's sort of the energetic opposite of restlessness and anxiety. It's where your mind just sort of doesn't have enough energy, and your body, you really, really want to lie down in meditation. You really do, and you pay for the privilege to if you're in a meditation. Really, really, that's really what I need to do. And actually, funnily enough, there's sometimes that, as Kakasha Mitra was saying, that might be because you are really tired, and it might be that there's a way of working with sloth and torpor which is actually it's a kind of resistance to experience, and that you can break through it, and it can be a really lovely thing to break through. It's quite an unpleasant thing to work with, because everything about it is saying, don't work with this. This is not a thing to be worked with. This is a thing for the lying down and shutting off. But actually, if you can really feel that sloth, that torpor is a funny word, like just the heaviness of the body, the lack of energy, if you can really tune into the fine grain of it, it can suddenly become, there's energy there. Very often there's energy there. So that's that. And then doubt and indecision is what's the doubt and indecision is sort of like the dividedness of our minds. So very often our minds are just, our energies are not flowing together. There's we're sort of neither here nor there. We haven't really even fully committed to this meditation. We haven't quite decided whether the path of meditation is a good thing on the whole, whether it's really going to go anywhere, or we have some doubts about this particular type of meditation. And that could be something that, in our lives in general, we haven't yet found a way of really something we really can commit our whole energy to. So we're in a state of not quite being decisive. So those are the hindrances. And that's a pretty good list of unskillful states, because behind each of these states is what the food source of them is unawareness, habitual unawareness, and there are slightly deeper versions of they're more worked out version of craving and hatred. These things that drive if you know the wheel of life is driven by craving, hatred. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. That's another image. How are we doing? Okay. So there's other ways of working with hindrances, and I just wanted to mention a few of them. And these are called the antidotes to the hindrances. And you could remember one, just need to remember one and give it a go. One is considering the consequences. So the basic thing is to be aware. And often, as I say, awareness itself will release some of the energy from that basic clinging that we have. Clinging in terms of clinging to either hate in a kind of something out of aversion, or clinging to it out of craving. Often that can just dissipate. But it might be if we're stuck in some deeper state like blame or resentment, and these thoughts that we have, if they feel very compelling, and maybe a sense of right and wrong has come in. Am I right? Was I wrong? I'm in the right. We can reflect. Do I really want this to be my dominant state of mind? Because it could be if we keep going with it. It could easily be the thing that comes to define us. And maybe some really bad consequences will come out of that if we let that carry on. Maybe we'll do something in the end which we really do regret, and that marks our life. That is a weighty karma that really marks our life. And we can all do that. We can all do things that are pretty heavy. And it might be that it's just that really unpleasant thing that you said to someone that you love, for example. That it might not seem from the outside like a really terrible thing, but it can have terrible consequences that can go on and on. So just a reflection. This is a reflection, considering the consequences. Then there's cultivating the opposite. I won't talk about that very much, but if we're in a state of sense desire, for example. And this is neurotic sense desire. So I woke up this morning, I opened the curtains and it was a blue day, and that's a sense, and I was really like, great, at last, this blue sky. That's a sense, but it's not the kind of sense desire that we're talking about here. We're talking about something that that doesn't really appease us. It's just craving. There isn't any joy in it. There isn't any payoff even after a while. It's just hankering after something, just endlessly because. So you might cultivate. What would be the opposite of that kind of neurotic craving? Contentment, some kind of contentment. And you can directly cultivate that in meditation. You can bring spaciousness into the body. You can just broaden out. You can use the breath in various skillful ways to, allow whatever that energy is that's caught up in that craving. You can breathe right into it, and you can allow the energy that's behind all that craving that's caught up in it to move up into the body. You can feel what's the emotion behind this? Is there any? How do I feel? And the process of becoming aware and having that intention to create contentment or spaciousness, that's cultivating the opposite. The third is Skylike Mind, and under this there's a kind of a range of attitudes which just broaden out awareness from a contracted state. I think this is the one that I personally always use the most. So I find cultivating the opposite, I just find that a bit tiring sometimes. But actually I should do that a bit more. But Skylike Mind might be something like, as I say, so what would be one example of that? Well, a Skylike Mind is an image, isn't it? So that's an image of the clouds passing through the sky, and that's an image of letting go. It's an image of noticing the space, that tapping into the sense of spaciousness and stillness. Might be just ignoring, actually. That's another thing you can do in meditation. Sometimes you can just ignore your mind. I'm doing this course where I'm doing a parenting course. I've just adopted a little boy, and we do this thing called skillfully ignoring a little child. But it's not like ignoring. It's not that ignoring, okay? It's about keeping them in your awareness, but really not paying any mind to the annoying habits, the whining, the sort of the deliberate smashing of the spoon on the table or something. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. And you can ignore your own mind. It's perfectly allowable to ignore. In fact, I think it's a beautiful thing to do, is just completely ignore your own mind. It's a fruit of serious practice when you can just see your own mind going, but you somehow don't, in a sense, you don't care about it anymore. It's like, that's actually quite a beautiful thing. You can kind of go, you're not quite, that obviously implies you're not quite so attached to You're loosening your attachment. Let's leave it like that. Leaves on a stream is another image. Actors on a stage. You're letting your mind broaden out from the specific contents into a more spacious awareness of them. So you're creating a kind of Skylike Mind. And there's two more. One is suppression, so you can actually just say no. Sometimes you have to do that to a child as well, don't you? No. It doesn't usually work with a child because it's oppositional, isn't it? And they're a person too, and they're like, no, no, I'm not having you. No, that's not always a good. But done with awareness and sensitivity, we can just say to our minds, just stop that. It's not unlikely to work with a very heavy state, very strong state of mind, but it might be something that you can do. The final one is that we go for refuge in Buddhist terms. This is where we introduce a perspective. I see this as the perspective. We go for refuge to the Buddha. It just means that perspective of, I don't know. There's more going on here. I can't tell within this meditation practice. I can't really tell conclusively what's happening. In my life, I don't really know what's going to happen down the line. But I feel stuck. I feel stuck with the state of mind. I can't work with it. It's too much. None of these techniques that I've just sort of been through quickly, none of them really work. You're having these kind of thoughts. I'm just like this. I'm no good. I'm blah blah blah. Whatever it is that's coming up, it's like I can't work with this. This is ridiculous, and it's not working. No techniques I can try and let go. I can go Skylight Mind in my body. Nothing works. It's a kind of just laying that whole mass of problems at the feet of the Buddha. Traditionally, you would say, I don't know. There's something bigger than this, and that's a kind of confidence that that's quite a lot of confidence to do that. So those are the hindrances. This is eradicating the unskillful that has arisen. So we've worked a bit, that in our lives we're trying to put ourselves in good conditions as well as we can. We can't avoid all unpleasant conditions. We have to be intelligent about this, and think of one or two things in our life that really cause us to spin off into really unskillful negative states, and look at the conditions behind that, and guard yourself from getting into those conditions. That's stopping the unskillful from arising, or the unarisen unskillful. And then working with your mind in meditation, of course in your ethical life, in your practice of what we do in our lives, body, speech and mind. We're all the time, particularly in meditation, where we're trying to notice what has already arisen on the basis of previous conditions and apply some effort to it so that it dissipates. There's two more which I'm not going to mention in great detail because they're going to be mentioned in the next week, but of course developing the skillful, the effort to develop what is skillful. So this is to develop the skillful unarisen, to bring what has not arisen out. And really, in order to practice fully, we're not going to be motivated by merely just not having unskillfulness in our minds. I mean, we're not going to. There's not enough on the upside if we're just thinking about not being. I can only think of one example of this. Like, sometimes have you ever wrestled with your mind when someone gives you too much change in a shop or something? It doesn't happen now because it's all cars so much, but it used to be occasionally you'd get an extra tenner or something in your change, and what is it that would drive you to go and give that £10 back? It could be guilt. It could just be that you feel you don't want to get caught out or something like that. But a strong sense of the benefits of the skillful mind and the kind of a mind which is not grasping and isn't so petty to think that it's going to really, really benefit from having that extra bit of cash. So a taste of a skillful state of mind is so important. That's just a small example, but we really need to cultivate the skillful. And in meditation terms, this is usually described as the jhanas, the states of mind which arise beyond these. So these are called the coverings as well. They're not just called hindrances. Probably a better description of them is that they cover, or they occlude the mind. That's what we just get involved in these, in varying degrees, of course. I mean, not all the time. But what we're trying to do is notice that there's other seeds going on. There's skillful karmas that are in there as well. There's a bit of gratitude. There's a feeling of there's awareness. There's a bit of metta creeps in, and we're trying to feed those seeds. We're trying to give attention to them in meditation, and they then start to predominate, and they can move into a whole series of very beautiful opening states of mind in meditation. That would be probably in a couple of weeks. Somebody will talk about meditation as dhyana. The final one is maintaining the skillful that has arisen. So we have these skillful states of mind all the time, and no doubt we're all the time a mix, aren't we? We're very often a mix of unskillful, that which is tending towards contraction, obviously ill will, a kind of habitual, unaware states of mind, and then there's openings. There's openings of the mind. They're all there. So we maintain what has arisen. So I'm not going to say any more about any of that. Are there any questions before I move on? No, I'm just nearly finished, so not very long. Any questions on this? This is the effort. Right effort would include all those 4 exertions. Does it make you want to do it, or does it make you want to go to bed, or?
Is there a difference between developing the skillful and cultivating the opposite as an antidote?
That would be in that area, yeah. So
Or is it the same thing?
yes, yeah. Obviously, these is just a way. All what you're trying to do is to cultivate the skillful in spiritual practice, and that might mean sometimes you have the unskillful that you have to work with. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you know what the right thing to do is?
The right thing to do.
Yeah, how do you know which of the between considering the consequences or cultivating the opposite or Skylike Mind?
When you meditate more, you could just pick one and give it a go, and see what it does. Especially if you're meditating, several times a day in good conditions, you have the chance to really apply those in a much more subtle way. So give them all a go. Go with your instinct as well if you think that. But sometimes it's good to just sort of do something a bit different in meditation. We might have our one go-to thing, but then actually maybe think of another thing to do and try that after a while. Yeah.
How can you, sorry, was that me?
Yeah, that's you, yeah.
How can you tell the difference between a neurotic sense desire and just one, like you said about the sky looking beautiful?
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you become maybe aware of like where a sense desire, because surely we only desire things that is in some capacity meeting one of our needs.
Yeah.
So
maybe.
Is that not good to like desire something that might meet a need?
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Obviously, that we, as human beings, we need various things. We need, not just food. There's a whole list of things, aren't there? From food up to purpose, up to community, communication, purpose, meaning. We need all sorts of things. So there's a strong vein of positive desire in Buddhism. We do want something, and that is called. In the end, we do desire. if we're cultivating the Buddhist path, we're cultivating a love and a desire for the state that is beyond suffering. That's represented in the Buddha and all the qualities of the Buddha. The imagined that we can only but imagine. We want them. We yearn for them. We do pujas, which explicitly bring out the whole colour of what the mind could be beyond this little craving thing, which is just going on and on. It never ends. It's what our friend who did this poem says is a relentless infinite ocean of samsara. That's the infinite ocean of samsara. It never ends. It's never satisfactory. It never appeases the mind in any deep way. We never rest in natural great peace with these things. Yeah, we can. So there's huge desire in Buddhism. Yeah. But I think so how can you distinguish that from this more neurotic craving aspect? I think it's actually quite simple when you recognise it. It's not complex. It isn't really bringing you anything. It doesn't deliver. It's just a habitual wanting that hasn't yielded any positive fruit for you, and it has that kind of narrowness and kind of not. It's the mind just regurgitating things, and I'm trying to think of an example. Anyway,
so like desiring maybe like material things, like I don't know, new jeans.
Yeah.
Just that kind of like. Would that be?
We all need jeans, don't we?
We do. Yeah.
So how would that be? Yeah, it's not
if you've
quite.
already got loads of jeans and you keep thinking about jeans.
Yeah. Then you're revolving in the infinite ocean of jeans. You haven't. Your mind is becoming conditioned by that aspect, which is ultimately quite unsatisfying. And ultimately doesn't. It might not be that it's terribly harmful, but it isn't fulfilling your deepest longing. It isn't activating that which could be activated within oneself, So yeah, I mean, there's loads of little examples. I mean, deep. It can go deeper than that. It can be really harmful. These states, particularly ill will, obviously. That's yeah. Yeah. Great. So, any of the questions, Mark? You had a question? Thank you for that question.
How would you suggest we get a measure of it, in the sense that the hindrances, I understand, are one side of the coin? Let's say sloth, for example. How do we follow the Buddha in not being slothful, but not also making over effort? What's the teaching with regard to that? Because obviously he talks so much about some of the things that went too far.
Yes.
You have to then understand the measure of it, but what would be in the teaching with regards to the hindrances?
I don't know. Sloth. I can't. Could you say it in some other way so I can...
Yeah, sure. So I guess the way I've understood it, and I may have misunderstood it, but that with the hindrances you have, so sloth for an example, but then there is an ability to make too much effort. So for example, at the point in time when the Buddha was not eating anything, that was his understanding of how he could do it, and you could describe that in many ways with the hindrances, but he was very mindful in telling us not to take something too far. How do we measure that, or is there?
Well, one way might be in meditation. If there's a lot of tension in the body, if you're just reducing tension in the body through your effort, that might be a sign. This is a bit too much effort that I'm making. As you might be like that, or you might. Sometimes it's just, there are phases in our life when we might need to make a lot of effort, and we might be keenly taking up spiritual practices, and that's good. That's a phase of spiritual practice. We do need to wear our hairy feet out on walking path or whatever. But then we learn something. We learn, actually, I need to yield more to maybe emotions. Maybe I'm leaving out the emotional aspect of my experience in some way, or maybe there's something not in. I need to bring something else in the picture. So we're all the time using effort wrongly. We're all the time just in balancing up. We're just balancing what we do. I'm going to finish but I just wanted to say one more bigger thing, which is just to put this. I had actually got 3 pages on it, but I haven't got to them, so I've got another talk there. That's great. When we make an effort, this is talking about very specifically, but in my life, I think I would say the effort that I'm making in a bigger sense is to do with, obviously the Dharma, which I said I was going to talk about, which I haven't talked about. But it's to do with, really cultivating a sense of connection to a source of life, which I intuit more and more, and that finding a way of talking about life in this culture that we have. People could say all kinds of things about the culture. It's good, it's bad, it's confusing, it's multiple, it's various. It's got all sorts of things. But it didn't really teach me. It didn't really teach me about that a deeper connection to life, to a source. So part of the bigger effort is to try to build our whole imagination or our whole sense of life in a bigger sense. And here we come into ideas about life and death, rebirth, nature, the body, and the deeper aspect of the Dharma, which is pointing beyond even the kind of mind which we have now, which is pointing beyond that, and that is not separate from me, but it's something that needs to find expression. So there's a bigger picture, is all I'm trying to end by saying. There's a bigger picture to all these little efforts that we're making in our lives in various ways. The evolution that's going on is much greater than that, and that somehow, if we're going to have an effective practice of say something like meditation, we're also going to have to address, for ourselves and in a way that we find we can explore what really is life about, and we can that exploration is something that we obviously do in the Sangha, in the Buddhist community. We're trying to evoke something that's much greater, something that both is us in germinal form. We have this potential, and it's much bigger than us, much bigger than my sort of little personality, my names, my identity, or whatever. It's much bigger than that. I'll end with the poem again, then we got to go. Rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thoughts, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. Okay. Just wanted to end not on effort, but on natural great peace. All right, that's it. We're good. Thank you very much. And see you next week.